So most tech startups don't fail because of bad products. They fail because they never figured out how to sell them. And not just sell in the traditional sense, but really how to systematically, predictably, and mathematically build demand. Because in an enterprise B2B, pipeline isn't luck. It's not hustle. It's not even branding. It's math. And today's guest has spent 25 years proving that. Welcome to the Anvil and Iron podcast. Jonathan Buckley, I'm so glad to have you here.
I'm really pleased to be here, Joe. Thanks for the invitation.
Great. Well, you're the CEO of the Artesian Network, where you guys help B2B startups build and scale and go to market. Tell us a little bit about it. You know, there's only one you in the world. Let's start with you.
Sure. Well, I started off my career. I was a career CMO, VP of marketing in some cases for companies public and private in Silicon Valley, all tech related companies. I was also part of the founding team of the company earlier in my career. And it was about 2009 or so, partly out of necessity, is that, we had a pretty terrible economic situation. And out of feeling a need that I saw, I had enough, or a number of friends, I should say, that had become CEOs in their companies. And they all said the same thing. And that was they were not getting the ROI out of their marketing teams. And they were missing gaps here and there. They all had $15,000 or $20,000 a month they could put towards it, but not the expense of this full-time marketing team they had. So I came up with the Artesian Network. An artesian water well, Joe, is a well that if you drill it in the right spot, the water comes up under its own pressure. And so that became my metaphor in founding the company for building revenue models. So over time, I added kind of a full team behind me. So I step in as the fractional CMO. We target very specifically tech companies, particularly B2B tech that are selling to the enterprise, but not exclusively. The methods are very similar in marketing outside the core enterprise. Different people, different messages, and ways to reach them. But, the framework's there. And since 2009, if you look at our whole customer base since then, more than 50% of them have ultimately made it to IPO or M&A exit. Way better than the statistic that 5% of tech companies make it to Series C only, just 5%. So
You stole my thunder a little bit there. I'd done a little research on you, and that's incredible. I want to dig in and how do you do that? I mean, one of the things that stood out to me is this idea that lead generation isn't magic, it's math. How do you tell me about that, and how does that conflict with the way most tech founders think about it?
Sure. So, yeah, I do have a couple of articles on that, building a flywheel for your company, the math and science of funnel building. So I was trained as an economist, came up through management consulting, really quant-based, and my team is as well. So you can't manage what you can't measure. So very early on, before the systems of today, we would build custom models to look at clicks and to look at opens and these sorts of things. And we found patterns in things. So for instance, in the enterprise, when selling to the enterprise, we found that there are, say, 6 to 7 constituents, not 6 to 7 buyers, but there's usually a single buyer, but there are constituents that either can float your sale or kill it. So finding them, the ICP, ideal customer profile, and the personas is an imperative, and to prove it out. Then the next thing is you have to touch them 5 to 6 times, probably within a 90-day period. This is a psychological studies keep coming back to this, but so 6 to 7 people, 5 to 6 times. Then you have to build systems to make that happen. Obviously, you can't send 5 to 6 emails, and 3% of them get opened in the first place. But an orchestrated system that would include perhaps social ads that link to some content, obviously an email outreach, but in the context of a LinkedIn interaction, maybe a connection request with short messaging. We automate this whole process now. AI has made it much easier. And we focus on the 5 to 6 people, 6 to 7 people, 5 to 6 times. And it depends what market segment it's in, but there are a variety of different marketing mixes that we would recommend. And that's how you build your system, your content calendar. There's also math behind how many times a week you should post on social, how many times you should send emails in a month, these sorts of things. So we follow the formulas that we've proven over time.
Super. So you've worked with dozens of startups, and over 50% of them have had some kind of successful exit. Either they got bought, or they they got a round of funding. They went to the next level, the level that the founder was wanting to go when you came aboard. What makes those companies different?
If you count the companies that went on to get more funding, it's much greater than 50%. I was just counting the ones that had successful exits. So the number, I think we're over 60 clients now that we've had, and it's a little over 50%, sure, have made it to IPO or M&A. Now, we don't take them all the way there. Our company is designed to set them up efficiently, build the marketing funnels they need, the messaging and positioning that's proven. It sets the stage for the company to move up to the next level. Usually it's after a Series B, sometimes a little later, that we do advise they bring in a full-time marketing team with a VP of marketing or a CMO. It sounds self-serving, but we have proven it over and over again. These early stage tech companies are hiring senior marketing people too soon. They're pulling out of large companies disproportionately. That folks in larger companies are trained on optimization versus origination of a playbook, right? And they're usually focused in a silo of marketing. So you need generalists that have pattern recognition across many of these things. So we've had 2 failures in our background. We knew they were coming and advised, and the rest went on to higher levels of financing. We'll see in the next 10 years where they end up.
Well, listen, 2 out of 60 is an incredible statistic as far as failures. What are those companies that are really going on in the next level? What are they doing differently? You mentioned this concept of like a sales and marketing MVP. What does that actually look like to you?
Sure. Well, since we work with a lot of engineering founders, they come up through engineering, software, hardware, whatever it is. We've put a framework together that sort of appeals to them. They're used to the discussion of an MVP for the product. We advocate building a minimal viable product for your messaging, positioning, your funnel. In other words, there's a lot of tuning to do, and you need that time the product is being refined to refine how you're going to reach your audience in a repeatable, predictable way. So the companies that make it follow a pretty set kind of pattern, right? Your seed financing is usually for prototyping. Your Series A, by the time you get to your Series A, now you have to work on building the mathematical formula of your funnel. You need to know that you put $1 up top, you can get, say, $10 or $20 out the bottom, right? And you can do this in a repeatable, predictable way. This proves that you are hitting the right audience with the right value message through the right channels. And then you can start more reliably hiring sales staff to scale, right? Companies too often, the ones that don't make it, use the capacity model to say, well, we're going to sign $1 million a year in quota per person. We'll hire 5 people. We'll count on 5 million for the year. Maybe they take into account there's churn, of course, but the really big picture is they haven't proven that anyone can make it to $1 million, right?
Right.
You need to have a couple of entrepreneurially minded salespeople that work closely with marketing through this proving ground that I mentioned. It's a learning process. And only after that is complete and your data shows that you're there, should you start throwing fuel on the fire. The companies that burn out may not have exhausted their MVP process with the product. Likewise with sales and marketing, and they burn out. They lose they can't raise any more cash at the end of that rainbow. Rather than having the fortitude, the ability to make it through iterations, restarts, and refocus.
Wow, you touched on a couple things. I want to rapid fire on a couple things real quickly. One, how refreshing do salespeople, professional salespeople that come into an organization for one of a company that you're doing fractional, how excited are they to have marketing willing to be part of that journey with them and play nice in the sandbox?
Yeah, so interesting. We usually are very tight with the sales folks, but there are times, Joe, where we come up, it's less today than, say, 10 years ago, but we're using methodologies that break the old enterprise sales model. For instance, SDRs and BDRs are not as needed today. And that doesn't mean absolutely not needed, but you don't need a team of 10 with AI to do some of this repetitive lead building activity. And even 10 years ago, before we had AI, we had a lead scoring methodology that worked well through marketing automation system and interconnected systems that we didn't need 10 people anymore. Well, the older sales executives, the ones that had come up and built their career and were towards the end, didn't necessarily glom onto that soon. What they saw was a loss of power because there's a loss of headcount, and something that was comfortable to them may no longer be the case. And so we were met with a lot of headwinds over the years. It's a change management thing. And we have to go through that with the sales team. The younger folks on sales teams tended to really like that because they were being served a lead that was validated beyond someone attended a conference or clicked on the website, right?
Gotcha. Did you feel like you got more resistance from like the sales leaders in these organizations?
Yeah. It was the CROs or not always, but if there was going to be some headwinds with sales at all, it would be over the change management stuff that came with the Artesian Network advocating reducing inside sales and increasing marketing budgets to handle it more digitally before it was turned over to an AE. Does that make sense?
Yes, indeed. Of course. So when you look at your clients, where do they struggle more, typically speaking, building the pipeline or actually converting it into sales, once it's there? Is it more of a sales execution issue, or is it just, figuring out the right framework to get their messaging out and generate leads?
I see your question. Yeah, so there is a pattern to the companies that we just start with, right? Coming up from engineering, they more often than not promote their product based on the features and functions and the technology, right? That's the thing that's incredible, right? The technology. People don't buy technology or features and functions per se. They buy first a solution to fix some problem that they have. And that's where you build the bridge in value messaging between how it's built and what it does and what value it provides. Like I tell my team, it's still relevant to this day. Maybe some of your listeners don't remember the iPod, but Apple was late to the market, very late, probably one of the last entrants into the MP3 market. They were twice as expensive as anything from Sony or Zen Player at the time. And they had a lot of great tech in the iPod. It was a great innovation. They didn't lead with it. They led with 1,000 songs in your pocket, which begged a lot of questions, like how do you do that? But the value statement was up front. They sold with the value, not the technology. Sony was still talking about having, 50 gigs of, or at the time was megabytes of memory and, connectors and speeds and feeds. People wanted to know, you might remember, Joe, that was a time where you had a player, you might have put 200 songs on it and you wanted to listen to 180th song, you had a toggle for the next 6 minutes to get to song 180, right?
You're actually picking at a scab that really actually hurts a lot, and I'm going to tell you why. No. I'm just tongue in cheek. I really think that Apple could bring back a little mini MP3 that that you could just marry up with your phone and then not have to exercise with your phone.
Right.
My daughter is a long distance runner. They're all running with their phones. I bet they would love to have that little clip and just do their AirPods straight into it. You can
Right.
almost go backwards with all of the Bluetooth capability, and just
Right.
transferring of information. Just
Yeah.
take it, tap it up against it, clip it to your shirt, and put your AirPods and
Right.
go.
They had that little mini iPod that was perfect
Awesome.
for exercising.
It was
Yeah.
awesome. All right.
Mhm.
So, all right, let's talk about the flywheel concept a little bit. What makes it work in enterprise B2B? Tell me about that concept for those that are not familiar with it.
Well, the idea of a flywheel is that once you set it in motion, it maintains its speed over time rather than having to be pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed. So, look, if you validate you're in the right market, talking to the right people with the right message and the right product to meet their business needs, you're going to be met with far less resistance. You don't have to sell as much. That doesn't mean you don't sell, but it works like a flywheel. So if you know that you're appealing to CIOs with a certain value message for your product, not the speeds and feeds, that comes third down on the website, right? Not that it's not there, you don't lead with it. Then you can start to see, say, open and click and call to action clicks on a more pattern basis. And I wrote a lot about this. In that flywheel article, there are actual benchmarks that we try and hit before we recommend to the CEO, let's pour $1 million on this. Have the foundations done. Some of our experiments, like with ads, for instance, starting out with these companies, are $400 a month. That's how small you can make the experiments. And then when you get the clicks that you expect, it resonates with the content you're providing and all of that works together as a system, then you put the $1 million on it because you can expect to get 1 million times whatever more out of the bottom of the funnel.
Okay, so that's interesting. So you're working on like a lot of AI enhanced go-to-marketing and so forth. Where's AI actually moving the needle versus just hype? I mean, everybody's seeing about it. Everything that you read has those two letters. Where is it moving the needle in real world in what you're doing with and for your clients versus what's just hype?
Right. Well, the short answer, first of all, is it's moving the needle almost everywhere at the same time. But I don't know that some of the stuff that we're experimenting with in our company is ready yet for the customers without putting them at some risk. But people have now become quite familiar with the large language models, very good for the basics of copywriting, ad writing, storytelling. It also helps greatly with value claims analysis when you're doing messaging. there are these tools, whether it's, Claude is one of the best we've found, Gemini 3 for different things, Perplexity for research, and still ChatGPT for ideation we found to be very good. It's an important part of it. But I think it was around February 5th of this year was the starting gun, really. It was the agentic AI movement. OpenClaw, everyone, that's their name now, but a lot of people became familiar with what agentic AI was through what OpenClaw released. And Claude, each of the foundational models have their own agentic side to them that they're building, but this is where it can actually do stuff for you. And many times autonomously. Now, we are advocates still of having a human in the middle. So we have checkpoints, but we develop an ICP and the personas, and we can release a bot to collect the prospects, the prospect list. We connect it with tools like Apollo IO we've been using more recently for enrichment and targeting. There's also a sequencing engine in there. You do have to cross-connect it to a LinkedIn automation program, and then you can make a whole system operate from once a week, comb for this type of ICP, enrich it, score it to make sure that it's a company with the profile that really does meet your ICP goals, and then put it into a sequence. And we have different formulas for sequences over time, but that really helps. Apollo, for instance, I just mentioned, replaces like 6 tools that we used to have to buy: ZoomInfo and Bombora and MailChimp or HubSpot. We still use HubSpot quite a bit, but there are other tools like website landing leads from your landing. We used to use a product called Lead Lander back in the day. It brings them all together into one platform. It makes it easier for us, a lot less costly than it was just 5 years ago. And more important importantly than the cost savings, it's the speed that you get by integration, right? So
how about when you're coming in and you're in this fractional CMO role, what do you see the biggest mistakes companies are making with AI as it relates to what you do, what you help them with? Like, what do you have to usually go in and kind of
break? Well, it depends. It depends on the size of the company. The ones that are, in their growth phase, or even the larger companies, their problem is being approaching it too conservatively. Now, I'm not saying release the bots on your network. I am not saying that. That OpenClaw has something like 32,000 security flaws in it of record. What I'm talking about is, there's an apprehension that their company's going to get gutted if they adopt it. The fact remains, it very likely will happen over time for all of us everywhere in all kinds of jobs. But right now, there's a race on to be more competitive than the company next door. And you have no choice but to augment your people with tools that can be leveraged like this. Now, the small companies, there are some that expect too much of it too soon. And I've written an article about this, but in just isolating it to marketing, even though we add a machine as a coworker on these projects, of bots as coworkers, there's an expectation that it's ready to take on everything, and you still need an orchestrator, and a seasoned one at that, in marketing. So maybe I'm playing less cello and violin now, and I'm up as the conductor, and the violin and the cello is being played by an AI, but you need an orchestrator still with that seasoned eye towards pattern recognition that can pull these together. It's just like having another employee if you're using a bot correctly, right?
I like that. Okay. By the way, quick book recommendation. You may have heard of it already. Theo of Golden.
Okay.
Is the name of Golden. Golden's like the town or whatever. Cello is kind of plays a pretty pivotal part of the book. It's a wonderful, wonderful book. I haven't run into anybody that hasn't absolutely loved it. It's a relatively new book. Great
Okay.
little story. I got the author basically did the private bookstore circuit and got it published, and it's really, really, really taking it off. So he didn't start with a big, publishing house.
Right.
Um, okay, very cool. So do you find yourself, working side by side with other fractionals, in these companies? Do you find yourself like other rev ops or CRO roles, or do most of the companies that you're working with, they have that already locked down? They need the lead gen and messaging better.
I've worked with quite a number of fractional CFOs over the years, sometimes CROs or somebody heading up the sales org when it's small. That's I frequently see that. Um, I've worked with a couple of fractional COOs, so they're pulling. The founder CEO is already seeing him or herself as more of a bias towards the technology, so they're really kind of like a CTO, and they need a business operations specialist. So that's been common. But these companies have found that you can conserve your capital, get better senior talent early when the company is in its most tender phase, yet be fiscally conservative and have better results faster. So I've worked with one company that had all fractional, right? So
So you're getting the gamut of it. No, that's awesome.
yeah.
Let me ask you that, if a founder gets marketing right but sales execution is weak, what happens? How does that impact you and your team?
Well, it's a very good question because that does happen, right? So one thing is you have to do your best from early on to build equity in your counterpart in sales in the outcome. So starting with even messaging, make them feel like they're part of the success of even messaging. That many just say, "Oh, that's a marketing thing." Um, you have to bring them along in the marketing automation process so they understand how the components come together, how leads are made leads. We always go through a lead scoring process with our CRO counterparts, and we work side by side. Now, there are times when still all of that's in place and sales is not meeting the same statistics that you proved out when it was a smaller company. But if you have your house in order, any good diagnosis of the company would show here's where the problem is. In other words, we're getting the leads that come down through the funnel and we're getting the POCs, the proof of concepts, but they're not closing. Then you can go in and use a product like Gong and actually listen to how sales is executing. It takes inspection. That inspection many times can't come from marketing because it seems, it's a co-opetition between the two forces. One other technique, Joe, that we've used that's been helpful is I mentioned that we're using far fewer SDRs, BDRs as of late. The ones that we do use, I find it useful to make them attached to the marketing organization, not sales. This way, we're not just bringing in a prospect, turns into a lead and nurture them along, but we actually go through the qualification before flipping it over to an AE directly. So again, it's about 50-50 out there. Most of the time, I see I guess it'd be more 60-40. More SDRs are in the sales org and not marketing. But if you take the philosophy that you need, marketing needs to be responsible to tee up something that's statistically likely to close, and they don't close over time, then you have to dig down. In our case, we haven't really come across any bad sales teams. We have come across the company raised 130 million on with 12 beta customers. We were brought in because we were told they had a messaging and positioning problem. We changed things around and ran a set of tests and delivered a whole dozens of people into the proof of concept phase, and all but one failed. And it wasn't sales, because we did inspect that process. It was the product relied on a piece of open source software that no one wanted to support. It was notoriously unreliable. So we had to report back as marketing that there had to be, when we looked at all the numbers, a product problem. That was a failed MVP to have missed that in your minimal viable product assessment.
Wow. Okay. That's, you're going through the hard things, but what I sense is that you're willing to collaborate early on with sales, and that's refreshing to a lot of people. I see that as a real value add, especially when you invite the CRO to get like they're feeling heard, right? That they have say into it, and then you can first you build rapport by having just even any kind of dialogue where you go, let's look at the customer journey, make sure our messaging lines up with what you think it ought to be. If we don't agree on, let's talk it through. Because between the two of us, we'll probably come up with something even better.
It's absolutely essential, Joe, that we're tied into the product team, we're tied into the sales team. I mean, it's more common than not that we're on the weekly sales calls with the team. Because in the early stage, remember, a startup's only real competitive advantage is speed and agility, right? Okay, they might have some patents, but try and defend those against a big company,
right,
with venture dollars. It's really speed and agility. So those weekly or even daily learnings, when you're working on your first 100 to 200 customers, it's absolutely essential. So you have to be joined at the hip, and you have to have a feedback loop to product management and engineering. For the example I told you earlier, where we found that, before we came in, they hadn't really validated an MVP.
Gotcha. So what's one piece of advice? You're working with a lot of founders, and they're trying to scale. They want to take their company to the next level. What's one piece of advice you'd give to a founder that's trying to build a scalable go-to-market engine?
Do it methodically. Don't listen to anyone that comes in and says, I can give you 20 leads in a month or 50 leads in a month for a low price of $19.95. Don't listen to that. What you need to do is methodically build your company up from a verifiable MVP together with what I call the MVP of sales and marketing, the funnel building. Make it methodical. For your Series B, you're either going to get a low valuation or no money at all if you don't show that mathematics in a repeatable, predictable fashion. So don't rely on someone who says, I can give you 20 leads next month. You need to know where the leads come from, how you reach them, what message to use. All of that you have to own as your own company IP. Don't outsource that to. Now, that doesn't mean don't work with a fractional team. What I'm saying is these call centers that say, we'll take it for you, or we'll do your email system for you. Get some seasoned help early and think of your company as a whole system and integrate that system and own the nuts and bolts of that system.
What's one of the downsides about hiring a CMO, full-time CMO, too early? Somebody that they've been in more established companies, and they get a carrot dangled in front of them of pre-IPO kind of thing. What could be the downside of bringing a really talented seasoned marketing person into the company early on, like full time?
Sure. Well, There's an article I wrote about this that actually got a lot of traction called "Don't Hire That CMO Yet." And I had a very well known VC and a very well known CEO on on a podcast of the same name, and we went through that, and we all saw the same pattern. Early stage company, maybe a Series A, goes out to hire a VP of marketing or CMO. You're paying $300,000 a year. There's recruiting fees. It takes you 2 to 3 months. And more often than not, they're pulling a director or senior director out of a larger company, an HP, a Cisco, much informatics or whatever industry you're in. And they're really smart and talented, yes, but you're going to get two repeated attributes. An optimizer, that style of marketing is optimization. Here's the playbook, it's validated, now optimize it, versus an originator, that entrepreneurial minded cowboy or cowgirl that doesn't mind the risk, likes new frontiers. And then the other thing is, in the larger companies, more often than not, you're going to get someone who is very deep in the weeds with something like PR or messaging and positioning or content development or email marketing. What you need is a generalist, someone who has maintained all of those things and can bring it to bear. Now, if you can find a person, a unicorn that's willing to take a risk on an early stage company like that, because the senior people know that only 5% of these make it to Series C, right? And the price is right, okay, maybe, but I have to tell you, the average tenure of a lead marketer in an early tech startup is around 12 to 18 months max. Depends regionally where you're talking. It's short. And the ramp up in training time, and then having that person then in turn either contract out or bring on additional team members, you're 6 months before you're productive as a marketing team.
Well, that's the point that I was actually going to bring up, for you. And you're not necessarily looking to self-promote, but let me promote you. You're bringing a team to the table, right? I mean, versus just hiring a CMO that then's going to have to create everything from scratch, right? And if you haven't done that for a startup before, that could take a long time.
Right. Unless you have a proven methodology. We use a framework that's kind of an adjusted lean startup strategy. If you've ever read the book or followed the methodology, lots of experiments and iterations. But, we're productive inside a week. We're very technical. It doesn't matter whether it's medical equipment. In some cases, we've had a successful medical equipment outcome, or the latest AI model, or purpose-built SaaS, whatever it is. We're usually productive within a week. That first week is spent getting to know the product hands-on. Again, it doesn't matter if it's deep enterprise. We've worked with that before. And then collecting data, asking questions, interviewing sales, and we're off to the races. There's no recruiting. I don't have to turn around and contract out for a web team. I have a great web team. And illustration and video. I have great product marketers. I have specialists in economic value analysis for optimal pricing, content, systems operations. So and many of us have worked together for 10 to 13 years. One guy's been working with me for 13 years. So we're seasoned, trusted with each other. We plug in and go.
All right, so we're kind of at a lightning round here. What are you really enthusiastic or passionate about? Coming up. What are you excited about next?
I suppose you're talking about next in the world of marketing, the world of tech.
Yeah, for you, like what are you working on to either bring to the table for your clients, your customers? What are you really passionate about right now? What are you excited about?
Well, I don't think this is unlike other people. Well, it might not be everybody, but I'm really passionate about what can be done with AI moving forward, to the point where I'm in the middle of an MIT course right now. I know I'm later in my career, but I rolled myself into an MIT course on agentic AI and business transformation with its use. I got another 8 weeks in it, and I'll be certified. But I have a computing system set up here in my home to run OpenClaw and other agents in a contained way, so they don't get a hold of my bank accounts and my emails and blackmail me if they catch that I'm going to shut them down, which is a real thing. So it's really how we can build a bigger business without necessarily growing the pyramid. We have AI members of the team. I'd love to keep and grow the team I have and use their seasoned backgrounds to be augmentative, the AI be augmentative of their talents and skills. And we can get on to many more clients in a given month, and deliver much more for what might be a lot less.
That's what I would figure. Hey, so most rewarding part of your work, I'm guessing, helping founders get to that next level that they wouldn't have gotten to without you.
Yeah. So growing up, my friends had rock star idols. I had inventor and CEO idols. I mean, back to the early 80s with Steve Jobs and Wozniak, I was fascinated. I bought my first Mac in 1985, had 1 meg of storage in it. Storage. And I would go on, by the way, to have one of the companies I was part of the founding team, the former Mac product manager from those days actually was the financier in our company. And then after that role, I worked with John Sculley, the former CEO of Apple, for about 6 months. So Apple's actually been a big part of my story. But what I found that I love the most is hearing the genesis stories, how they got the inspiration, where they found the chutzpah and the energy, the passion to push it forward. Their stories. This is value creation, and I love hearing those stories. That's rewarding. Seeing a founder go from a PowerPoint presentation to $100 million company in the span of 7 to 10 years max. Amazing, just amazing.
All right. Well, if you still know some people at Apple, just tell them they need to bring the clip back, but it would be different. You just put it right up against your phone, you clip it in, and you go. You wouldn't have to download stuff or anything. It just merges right with your. I think it's.
I noticed you don't have one, Joe, but I do have an Apple Watch which has an MP3 player on it.
You know what? You're right. Yeah, no. I actually forgot about that. I'm not. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So you can just put your earbuds in, leave your phone behind, and still be connected over a cellular network, all in one.
There you go. Look, you just solved my problem. I'm too cheap to buy an Apple Watch because I'm really hard on watches. And so I literally won't spend more than $50 on a watch. Don't tell anybody else because it's actually a nice looking watch.
Yeah, it's pretty nice.
Hey, I really appreciate you being, on the show, Jonathan. Some really interesting insight. I love what you all have done. I mean, you've created, this I guess it's like this outside expert, with a very deep bench that you can apply to any organization. If they need copywriters, you got copywriters. If they need, image work, you've got those people. You've got designers. So, hey, tell people how they can find you and get you as part of their team.
You got it. So 3 main ways. LinkedIn is always a good choice. It's Jonathan W. Buckley. I put my middle initial in there because there are other Jonathan Buckleys, and you'll find me. So number 2, jonathanwbuckley.com for my personal branding site. You can reach me through there. And third, Of course, the Artesian Network site, just artesiannetwork.com. Not artisan, but artesian.
That's right. Make sure you get that ESIAN in there in Artesian. Listen, if you got value from this episode, share it with somebody that's building something real, because great companies are not built on products alone. They're built on systems, discipline, and the willingness to learn before you scale. We'll see you next time on the Anvil and Iron. Keep forging on.
Thank you, Joe.